Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining another episode of Agents of AI. I'm your host, Peter Stubbe, a member of the Capto team. For those of you joining for the first time, two things to share. Capto is your builder of custom AI agents for finance, tax, and legal compliance departments and beyond. Capto is proudly based in Bulgaria, but delivering to clients across Europe as well as the United States and beyond as well too. Enough about Capto. This program is intended to highlight thought leaders, enthusiasts, people within our network in order to support the proliferation of AI tech and the use of AI agents. The uniqueness of our program, as you'll find out very shortly, is that our guests join in an anonymized or avatar state. So please feel free to guess who they might be throughout the course of the conversation, and wait till the very end as we reveal their identity, sort of like The Masked Singer for anybody who's a fan of that program. So getting right to it, would like to begin by introducing our guest. We're going to call them, I guess, the tax pig, or the we could come up with another name to address them throughout the course. But why don't you go ahead and introduce a little bit more about yourself, not revealing your name or company. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I quite like that name, Tax Pig. Maybe we'll stick with that. So I work in the UK and across Europe for a tax technology company who shall remain nameless for the moment. I've been in tax technology now for, I think, 17 and a bit years, which is not something necessarily that I set out to kind of try and do. I kind of came out of uni and thought going to qualify would be a good thing. So I went and did a qualification, spent 10 years in the Big Four, kind of cutting my teeth, but always implementing tax tech. So that was a path pretty well trodden, implementing tech, and then later on building tech. So I learned what it was to kind of build technology from the ground up and take it to market, all within the confines of the Big Four. And then after a decade there, I thought I'll give it a bit of a change. So I went from that to a kind of startup in Shoreditch in London. So sort of 14,000 UK employees down to about 30 overnight, which was a bit of a baptism of fire. Spent 18 months there, again, kind of building product, launching product. And then about 5.5 years ago, joined where I am now. And my role in the business is all around innovation. So I spend a lot of my time looking at kind of what technologies are changing the space that we work in, what technologies are plugging gaps for customers where previously technology didn't necessarily play a role or couldn't do a role. So all about understanding customers, their pain points, how they work, and then applying technology, traditionally new technology, and therefore traditionally completely for the last 2-3 years, therefore a heavy AI angle on that as well. So yeah, that's what I get up to. I get to play with lots of different toys on an ongoing basis.
Excellent. And it will be revealed at the end, but I do need to call out that your pig avatar is a little bit of a play on your last name as well. I'm just going to pause there so that we don't give away any more hints to the listeners. But okay, so diving a little bit more into your background and experience in tax, I like to ask this question kind of just in the blunt context of why that career, like why that tax, why keep returning to it? What motivates you now continuing to be a leader in the space and having this innovation title? Yeah, why tax? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Look, it was like I kind of said, I never necessarily set out to be in this world. I interned at Deloitte between second and third year of uni, and kind of just knew I wanted to go and get paid a little bit of money and do some experience for the summer. And then they kind of sent a list over of where you could go and work, and mine was a tax and audit rotation. I read all the things, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be an auditor. And I don't really want to do sort of like hardcore proper tax. So the technology thing kind of immediately stuck out to me. It's like, okay, let's go there. Ended up spending most of the summer there and then joining that team straight out of uni, because I always wanted to get that grounding in accounting and finance. So I knew I wanted to do the kind of graduate scheme there. And that team there just kind of threw you in a project. So you'd be on a project from anywhere from a couple of months through to some of the projects would last for 18 months, 2 years, and definitely really got to see the inside of kind of customers, which was quite cool, right? I'm a graduate, I'm 21, 22, quite fresh out of uni. seeing the inside of some of these big corporates and going, okay, this is quite an interesting thing to see. So I did that, and then when I moved over to KPMG, it kind of flipped to let's build stuff. So it wasn't just implementing third-party tech; it was building stuff, and that's where I kind of got really interested, because it was okay, not just these. Let's implement this tech and make it work. It's now more okay. How can we actually build this out to make this more applicable to customers? So just kind of I kind of fell into it in a way, but then kind of fell in love with it pretty quickly, because it's all about okay, well, how can we make this thing work better? How can we make our customers happier? And always just had that kind of natural, I want to speak to customers, understand what's going on. And the good thing is at the Big Four is that it's very easy to open customer doors. If you want to get a meeting with a big business and you work at one of the Big Four, kind of you can just walk in and they kind of will talk to you, and they give you time and they'll listen to you. So that was really, really good and interesting, and I suppose that's where I kind of got into it. And then since then, tax is not necessarily the coolest career path in the world, let's put it that way. But I've always found it quite fascinating in terms of actually it's a big, complicated problem space, right? It's actually quite interesting. You don't need to be, I've never done a tax return. I am not a tax geek by any way, shapes or forms, but I know enough to know, where things break, where people have friction, where you've got, and in our world, right, you're taking people who are super smart there, they've got great uni degrees, they've got 10 years of experience, and they're spending half their life in Excel, reformatting tables and deleting data and doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. So to me, it's actually a really interesting industry where there's loads to be done, loads of applications of new technology. So actually, I think I'm quite fortunate because there's lots of kind of applications of what we do and what we could do. So yeah,
that's a really great point, and it's funny. I always like to pull on the common threads that come up in these discussions, since we're talking to a lot of the same types of people. And one of the things that whether it's a finance professional or a tax professional, they try to scream through the microphone is that from a distance, this might seem like a boring career, not that interesting, but in reality, the complexity is what draws people into it, and the constant evolving. I'm speaking to a lot of tax people recently about the velocity of legislation that happens and how that's impacting the tax industry. It's turning it into more of a fast moving and more of an interesting role than people might perceive. So I might have just answered my second question in that summary, but I'm curious from your perspective, what is something that you feel is underappreciated by outsiders when it comes to the tax role? I like asking this question also in the context of, what would be something that you would prepare somebody who's earlier in their career to have to kind of deal with over the course of developing themselves, or fight for or argue for? Yeah,
I think it's interesting, right? Because I think, I look at some of the people in our business who are, some of the best people at, we do a lot of corporate tax. Some of the people that are really, really detailed and deep into corporate tax, it's not just that they understand the stuff, but they've actually got to then take the knowledge and as you say, new legislation comes out once or twice a year, and there's an awful lot of it. It's then not just about reading that; it's about then interpreting and understanding how they can make that work for a user, right? Because some of these things, and in tax, you'll be aware there's obviously lots of judgment. There are some grey areas, and how do you therefore make that work for users who, fundamentally the users just want to use software to get the answer, right? So it's not just about being a smart cookie, although that tends to be the case to a lot of people in tax, but also then using that judgment and actually being able to explain it to other people. It's the ability to take a very, very complicated scenario and dumb it down so that someone like me who knows a bit about tax can understand it, or indeed someone who doesn't know about tax can understand it. So it's that ability to translate, I think, is massively important. And actually, again, one of the things that you might not realize when you come to a lot of tax is that soft skills are important. They've always been important, but I think even more so nowadays, as we see some of the more kind of traditional Excel boring grunt work kind of disappearing. It's the soft skills to actually be able to talk to people and broker arguments and kind of translate from A to B. Some of those things that are not necessarily taught per se, but you learn through experience. So look, I was quite fortunate when I was in the Big Four, because I got such a lot of exposure early on to big customers. I would say anyone coming into the profession should try and do the same. Just get out there, speak to as many people as you can, and just expose yourself. And sometimes that puts you in, awkward conversations where something's gone a bit wrong, and we've all been on the wrong side of technology builds when something's gone wrong or failed or broken, and everyone gets called in at 10 o'clock on a Friday evening. Actually those things are, whilst they're not pleasant at the time, are some of the biggest learning experiences that I've had. So whilst never actively pursue a software thing go wrong, but actually learn a hell of a lot from when it does happen.
Very, very cool. All right. And again, we're going on perfect segues here, I feel. The name of the program is Agents of AI. Time to talk a little bit about those technological advancements and those changes. We like to ask kind of like two routine questions here. The first one is, how did you get involved with AI? What are some of the first use cases that you saw or put into production? We really like focusing on the things that are actually working and actually live. But think back to some of your first exposure. If you could share with us a little bit of a history lesson.
Yeah, so I mean, like many people, I think my exposure to AI came in a meaningful way when ChatGPT landed in October, November time 2022 now, years ago. And that landed, and I think like everyone else, or lots of people, it was jump straight in and throw stuff at it and be like, oh, that's cool, that's really interesting. But then quite quickly said, okay, how can this work for tax? And actually, we were pretty early in terms of by even sort of Q1 in spring into summer of 2023, we were experimenting quite a lot. So we actually sat down again, like we looked at corporate tax because it's a big part of what we do. We mapped the process end to end and went, where are the kind of opportunities here for stuff we've just not been, like problems we've just not been able to solve before. And we took some theories. We took 3 particular areas. We long listed about 25. We shortlisted 3. We took those 3 areas and went, okay, let's have a look at this. And we got some external AI developers in. We sat down for 10 weeks and we did some proper desk research on those areas and said, is the technology up to task? And this was like GPT-3. So like compared to what we see now, this is like archaic stuff you would sort of laugh at. This is like the floppy disk of back in the day now, right? You're kind of looking at this stuff going, oh my God, how could you ever get anything out of GPT-3? It was so bad. But at the time, it was pretty groundbreaking. And what that actually meant was we ended up taking that all the way through. One of those 3 ideas actually became a production tool we launched in February of 24. So we have a production Gen AI tool that's in use by like 100 customers now, including I think 3 of the top 10 accounting firms in the UK. So it's getting some pretty big use. And that was a specific area we'd known about for a while. We tried to solve it using more kind of traditional machine learning, and we just could not get it accurate enough. We could not get that accuracy of what we needed it to do up past about 40-45%, and suddenly GPT-3 is like 92%, and then you do fine tuning and get up to 95, 96. So that was kind of us, that real wow moment of going, oh my God, this stuff is like proper game changer. And that's why we took it through and we pushed it through. And yes, it took a while for, you know, what it's like with new customers. It's all very scary. It's this new AI stuff. It's this magic box. And how do you know it's working? And is it going to hallucinate and ruin everything? Well, actually, no. And now for us, it's, you know, we've had that product live nearly 2 years now. So it's actually almost path pretty well trodden for us. It's great.
Very, very cool. And I'm happy to hear you mention the importance of the accuracy, because I just think in the Gen AI world, we've posted about this more frequently and shared more updates as we talk to more professionals like yourselves. The fragility of financial and tax processes is just so important to have that high level of accuracy versus your, you know, no offense to our sales and marketing peers where, you know, 70 or 80% or even 40% is good enough because it happens immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear that you all went through such detailed processes to validate that went for, you know, to get it to that 92 to 95%. And, you know, I think that should be inspiration for other people that might be struggling with it and acknowledging like the limitations of AI, that, you know, that you need to find the processes where accuracy comes out to that 95% plus threshold.
Yeah, the threshold in tax is incredibly high, incredibly high. And even when you can have theoretical arguments about, well, how accurate are humans? And, you know, this is not a tool that's meant to replace decisions. It's meant to, you know, help people take a job that takes 2 hours. It's not meant to take a 2-hour job down to 30 seconds. It's meant to take a 2-hour job, present information to a user who understands what they're doing, and then they can do it in 10 or 15 minutes. It's not trying to get rid of humans. It's the kind of classic human in the loop, right? And we see that through the data that we kind of get in the back end. We see how long people take fixing stuff. We see accuracy, real time of how people are doing things. So like we monitor that stuff pretty closely. We have to, right? But yeah, the kind of mentality in the tax industry is like accuracy is key. and you do not have a product in tax if it's 80% accurate. It just doesn't work.
Excellent. So, all right. So acknowledging that the kind of whole additional threshold for your space and your industry, now looking ahead to what's next, and the models have improved. And as you've mentioned, a lot of what Capto does, if I could do a small plug here, is optimize those models for the specific processes that we're helping to automate, and getting to those higher levels of accuracy. But what I'm getting at is, what's next in terms of those aspirational AI use cases, the things that might be on your desk right now that are sitting in that 70 to 80% accuracy category, but you'd like to see them go into production one day? Like, if you put on your crystal ball, wizard hat, what would that look like?
Yeah. So we're like many, we're kind of deep into experimenting with agentic right now. So there's lots of different use cases. I think where we're going, because where we've been with, I guess, traditional Gen AI, even though it's still pretty new, but traditional, is like speeding stuff up and taking time away from more junior decision makers. What we're now looking at is more the kind of the review processes of tax. So the processes that are done by more senior people, and again, not to remove the senior people from the loop, but to serve them up valuable information. Because what we still see, and it happens a lot in the world of tax, is senior people, directors, partners, and other people in firms or heads of tax are still doing quite manual review. They're getting a tax return, they're getting a set of accounts on 2 different screens, and they're eyeballing across screens and going, does that equal that? Does that equal that? So we've been looking at agents. One we've looked at recently is around sort of R&D tax, which is really interesting. Can we get an agent to look at your tax return, look at your prior year tax return, look at your accounts, maybe look at some third-party documents, and come back with, again, not an answer as to whether it's right or wrong, but a suggestion of, okay, this looks pretty weird. You are a care home business and you're claiming R&D tax relief. That's not normal based on our understanding of this. So not saying yes, it's right or no, it's wrong, but more just flagging that to a reviewer, so the reviewer can then go and target their investigation. So they're not starting with a list of 100 things to tick through. They're starting with a targeted list of half a dozen things to tick through where the technology has shown that it may well be wrong. So that's where we think, at least in the nearer term, agents can play a good role, because they can act almost as that first or second line review to say, hey, we've looked at some stuff, we have made an assessment, go check it out. Because equally in that situation, there could be totally valid reasons why that would be normal, but it would be an exception to a rule rather than the rule.
Yeah, raising those behavioral red flags is something that people in your seat have brought to us before too. And I think you mentioned like the 2-screen case. Like I would venture to say that it's much more than 2 screens these days with all the disparate information. So using AI or using agentic tools to bring all those kind of panes of glass together into an individual source of truth. Definitely something that we're hearing about and definitely would like to see more of as well. So great use case. Now, final question, advice for people that are not as advanced as you. It could be where they start, or could be ways to get past what they're struggling with. I would say people sometimes will even share resources here, but it could be your personal advice or places people should go to learn more. Leaving it to you.
Yeah, I'm always a big advocate of just getting stuck in and dabbling. And there's so many of these tools around now, right? I'm sure pretty much everyone by this point has gone and jumped into ChatGPT, even the free version, and thrown some stuff at it to see what sticks. I think for me, what's been really eye-opening in the last few months is using Google Gemini. So I use Google Gemini a lot to build prototypes. Part of what we do is go and test theories with customers, and that used to be sit down with the designer, design a flow. They would go away for a few weeks, you'd work stuff through, and there would be a decent chunk of resource. Now it's a case of me sitting down with Google Gemini for a couple of hours, throwing some prompts in and building, prototype software. And just that kind of opened my eyes, I think, to other people. You can get onto. I've spent about £6 on Google in the last 3 or so months. It's not quite free, but it's nearly free. So I think there's no real, there's so many different resources out there. There's loads of good stuff, don't get me wrong, but actually I don't think there's any substitute for just going and seeing yourself. And even I've got friends who work in products and tech, and I would be like, have you just gone into Google and tried that stuff? And there are others, there's Lovable is great as well. Other tools out there, but I think fundamentally going in and just being throw a prompt at it and see how good this stuff is getting. And then people go, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And then they kind of build and build and build. And That's how people start these things. They pull up those threads, right? This is all a big, long, very messy ball of wool that everyone should be putting up lots of threads on. There's loads out there.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for such a great conversation, Tax Pig. It's now the time for me to stop calling you that and start to meet who you actually are. So if you wouldn't mind hovering over your settings again, and if you just simply click off where you initially selected your character. There we go. Perfect. All right.
Hi.
The tradition is I don't say your name and company. You have that honor. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself further. Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Russell Gammon. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at a company called Tax Systems, based out of the UK.
Great. Well, Russell, thank you very much for joining the program. Any final parting words for anybody? How to get in touch with you? Where to find you? What's just want to leave that door open for you finally before we conclude today.
Yeah, well, the good thing is my surname is Gammon, hence the pig, right? And there's not a lot of Russell Gammons knocking around on LinkedIn. So if people want to get in touch, that's usually the easiest way. I'm pretty busy on LinkedIn, like a lot of people are. So find me on there, and we can chat on there.
Perfect. And I also know that this is a time-sensitive thing, Russell, but you messaged me about an award that you all are up for. Or do you want to give a quick plug to that, even though people might be listening to it after the expiration?
Yeah. So there's a thing called Tax Tech 500. They monitor kind of tax technology across EMEA and products and people and whatnot. They've just started a poll for the top 50 voices in AI in tax. So I'm on there. So go and vote, please.
Yes. Okay. And then for those listening, please go back and access the original post or the recording. We'll include it in the description and make sure that Russell gets all the votes from our listeners. All right. Cool.